My final guest tonight is someone you need to know. Michael Thurmond is the Chief Executive Officer of DeKalb County. He's an attorney and has touched lots of lives in various state positions. He sees himself as a historian. His latest book is James Oglethorpe, Father of Georgia, a founder's journey from slave trader to abolitionist.
Well, we were in England, a delegation, 57 Georgians, historians, politicians, celebrating the 300th anniversary of his birth. And the plaque is erected near his tomb in the parish church of All Saints in Cranham, England, about 19 miles northeast of London. I was stunned. I had never heard the Father of Georgia described as a friend of the oppressed Negro. And it was at that moment I set out on this journey to determine whether or not that acclamation was true or false.
27 years you've worked on this.
27 years. And it's been an amazing journey. Monica, I've learned so much, but the biggest challenge was the things that I had to unlearn before I could actually access and learn and glean this new information.
What did you have to unlearn?
First, I had to unlearn the fact that Oglethorpe was known as a friend of poor people, of unemployed people. I had to unlearn it and expand it. I had to unlearn the fact that in Georgia, the Underground Railroad ran south, not north. That the closest free territory to Georgia was Spanish-controlled Florida. And not 10, not 100, but thousands of enslaved Georgians and later South Carolinians escaped to Florida, to Spain, and to the Seminole Territory.
When One-on-One continues, the lessons Thurmond hopes we can learn from the life of James Oglethorpe. The simple phrase, friend of the oppressed Negro, led Michael Thurmond on a journey to this book that he believes could be a help in today's political climate.
History, particularly American history, has become so toxic and so divisive. And I believe that if, in fact, that acclamation or that sentence was true, then that could provide a model for current and future leaders to be more expansive and inclusive and more progressive, and to recognize that we can evolve, we can grow, and consequently we can become better citizens and not just change ourselves, but also change the world around us.
It was fascinating to me to learn that when the colony was founded, slavery was not a part of it. As a matter of fact, they said there would be no slavery.
Of the 13 so-called British colonists, the original 13 colonists, Georgia was the only British colony to prohibit slavery prior to the American Revolution. Not New York, not Pennsylvania, not New Jersey or Rhode Island, but Georgia, the only British colony to prohibit slavery.
So what happened?
Well, what happened, of course, is Oglethorpe fought this very controversial battle with pro-slavery forces in Georgia and primarily in South Carolina. They fought and had this huge, very unvarnished debate about the efficacy of the enslavement of Black people from a moral, political, and military point of view. Ultimately, Oglethorpe lost the debate. He left Georgia in disgrace. He sailed to England in 1743, facing a court-martial and financial ruin.
The book details how a letter in Arabic from an enslaved Black man and a relationship with another led to Oglethorpe becoming an abolitionist. Thurmond says the life of James Oglethorpe influenced him at a difficult time in his life.
Well, after I had run for Congress and lost, and I'm in political exile again, and that's when I met James Oglethorpe while I was DFACS director during the era of welfare reform. And we were faced with this huge challenge of helping poor people who were unemployed get back into the workforce. I remember from middle school, I guess my World Book Encyclopedia, that Oglethorpe wanted to help debtors and impoverished British subjects to find a new life in the new world in this colony he would call Georgia. So he became the patron saint of DFACS. I hung his portrait in all the offices, and we used his vision for Georgia as our inspiration. And we helped over 90,000 families move from welfare to work.
Thurmond learned the value of hard work from his dad, who also valued education.
My father, who was a Georgia sharecropper, I was born not in Athens, but near Athens, and people know what that means.
Youngest of 9 children.
Youngest of 9 children. Father could not read or write, but loved education. And he decided, for whatever reason, to purchase a set of World Book encyclopedias. And that was like a family having a home computer now. And I set out not only to read the entire alphabet, the volume, but then to memorize it. And I just remember the G volume became my favorite.
What?
Georgia and Georgia history, which, by the way, I still have that volume in my library to this day. And I think I was in the 3rd or 4th grade when Daddy bought them. So I just began to love Georgia history. There were very few references to Black Georgia. And so I wanted to include the accomplishments of African Americans, and particularly African American Georgians, into the historical narrative of our state.
So when you went to Payne College, you majored in religion and philosophy. What had you planned to do with that?
Well, actually, my mother had a plan for me. And my mother's plan was for me to be a minister.
What happened?
Well, there's a story. So, and I majored in, and I love philosophy and religion. I love it. The religion, obviously, and world religions in particular, but the philosophy doesn't teach you what to think, but how to think. And you are a fellow philosophy major, so you understand that. But I didn't tell you, I received a degree, I earned a degree, but I didn't get the call. So about a week before graduation, I decided, I said, I better tell Mom, because she's bragging to all her friends that Mike is graduating from Payne College and he's going into the ministry. So I called home. I'll never forget it, Monica. I called. Mom picked up the phone and said, Mom, I got something to tell you. I said, I got my degree, but I'm not going into the ministry. She says, what? I said, well, I didn't get the call. And the phone just went totally silent. I heard her call my dad. She said, Sidney, this boy, Mike says that he's not going into the ministry because he didn't get the call. And I remember what my dad said. He said, boy got the call, he just wasn't there to answer the phone. He was out partying, couldn't answer.
After college, law school in South Carolina, and then home to pursue his political dreams.
I've always wanted to be a Georgia politician. I liked to, when my sisters, other kids playing cowboys and Indians, I was dreaming of being a Georgia politician. I'm sitting over there in rural Clark County, Georgia, watching Atlanta TV and watching Maynard Jackson and Andrew Young and Michael Lomax and all the others, and dreaming one day I might be able to make it. State Representative Bobby Hill, all of the people serving under the Gold Dome. And I was sitting there, all I really wanted to be was a Georgia politician.
Politics is where he's made history of his own. The first Black person since Reconstruction elected to represent Clark County in the Georgia State Legislature. The first Black person elected to a statewide office without prior appointment. Thurgood Baker was appointed Attorney General of Georgia by then Governor Zell Miller in 1997, and then was elected 3 times statewide.
My election back in 1998, it spoke more about the people who voted than it did about me. What it said was that even in 1998, there were a majority of Georgians who were willing to look at 2 candidates regardless of race or color, even party affiliation, and vote for the best candidate. It spoke volumes about the people of Georgia, more than it spoke about my abilities or my talents.
He also served as a DeKalb County school superintendent, a position his wife and daughter were reluctant for him to take.
Well, that's the only one of those jobs where Zola and Micaiah had an intervention. She came home and they set me down and said, you have lost your mind. They've been with me no matter what I tried to do or accomplish. That's the only time that my wife and daughter have basically said absolutely no.
And you still did it.
I still did it. Because,
why?
Well, 100,000 children. And if DeKalb had lost its accreditation, that would have been a devastating blow to those kids and their families. And I could not live in a county and allow all of those families and children to be so negatively impacted. And at the end of the day, it was the most fun I've ever had. It's the job I've enjoyed the most, with being school superintendent in DeKalb.
You are, I think, the best description of a servant leader. How do you see yourself?
Somebody who tries. I failed so much. I
Failed at what?
had a lot of things. But I've already told Zola and Micaiah that, put on my tombstone, he tried. That's it. Didn't always succeed. Oftentimes came up short, but was never afraid to try to make a difference for my community and the people who I've been called to serve.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of Monica Pearson One-on-One, check out the links on your screen and click the subscribe button.